Here's my list of some of the best and most unique amusement parks in the United States that are totally worth visiting. Now, a park could have made this list for various reasons, including great koshers, great food, great theming and atmosphere, or just being flat out weird. So let's get started. Start off with the weirdest park on this list, and that being Mount Olympus at the Wisconsin Dells. Now, the pros of this park include their crazy wooden coaster collection, which includes Hades 360, one of the only wooden coasters to go upside down. And then you also have Zeus, Cyclops, and Pegasus, which are all strange for their own ways. And then you also have an included water park, which features one of the craziest wave pools in Poseidon's Rage, which literally features 9-foot waves. And these waves are absolutely insane as you see everybody get knocked over, and from personal experience, I can testify to that fact of these waves being completely insane. Now, there are various cons with Mount Olympus, including the fact that this park literally has no landscaping throughout the park, as the paths are literally lined with rocks. And to further make this park even weirder, the 4 main coasters at the park have very low capacities, as all of their wooden coasters can only run with 1 train. And as for Zeus, Cyclops, and Pegasus, they only have 1 ride operator working the ride at a time. Now, Hades does have 2, but that's crazy low for any amusement park. And then another major con with this park, it is totally bizarre. Like I mentioned earlier, this park has several quirks about it that make it one of the strangest parks in the world, and you can see that as a pro like I do, but you can also see that as a con like many people do. So I don't blame people for thinking this park is one of the worst parks in the United States, but as for me, I see this park as an amusement park that is totally worth visiting if you're in the Wisconsin Dells. So let's move on to Knott's Berry Farm. Now, the pros of this park include the fact that they have many thrilling coasters, some very good flat rides, some good theming, though it's quite inconsistent, and some great food, and it's also fairly affordable, as I believe tickets for this park can range between $50 to $70, which is definitely affordable to average compared to most other amusement parks out there. And as for the food at this park originally started due to the Knott's Chicken Dinner restaurant, and let me tell you, that chicken is very good. And another founding aspect of this park was the ghost town section. And let me just tell you, that area has some very good theming, though it is sad that that theming is not continued throughout the whole park. And then another con when it comes to Knott's Berry Farm is the fact that this park sees some very heavy crowds. Now, this isn't too surprising considering the park is located in Southern California and is open year-round, so it makes sense why this park features some crazy crowds. But just to prove my point on how crazy this park's crowds is, one of their headlining attractions, Ghost Rider, can easily get up to an hour wait on most days. So if it wasn't clear already, I highly recommend visiting Knott's Berry Farm if you find yourself in Southern California. Let's move on to the most underrated park in Orlando, and that being SeaWorld Orlando. Now, the pros of this park is you have some great coasters, including 4 amazing B&Ms, including the likes of Mako, Kraken, Manta, and their newest coaster, Pipeline the Surf Coaster. And all of these are great rides, and even though some are better than others, they are all great. And you have some other great coasters, including Journey to Atlantis and Icebreaker, which are 2 great family coasters. And then as for some other great attractions at the park, you have Infinity Falls, which is, in my opinion, one of the best river rapids rides, as the rapids are insanely strong, and the drop at the end offers some nice variety. And then you also have some good theming throughout the park, and even though it's not like the most consistent, as it's mainly ride based. And then another pro with SeaWorld Orlando is you have some fairly good food. Now, none of this food is gonna like blow you away like some other parks later on in this list, but it is all very good food. And at least in my opinion, the pretzels at SeaWorld Orlando are a must buy when visiting the park. And as for some cons with the park, like I mentioned earlier, there is inconsistent theming, as much of the theming is ride-based. And other problems with the park is they could definitely use a flat ride, as really the only flat ride you have is the park's observation tower, and I wouldn't really consider that a flat ride necessarily. And ever since the park did remove Antarctica Empire of the Penguin, it is definitely missing a good flat ride. So honestly, SeaWorld Orlando, in my opinion, is a must-visit park due to great rides, great shows, and is just overall a very well-rounded park, and is definitely a must-visit in Orlando. So let's move on to the roller coaster capital of the world, and that being Cedar Point. Now, the main pro with this park is their stacked lineup of thrilling coasters. Two of their best coasters are easily Steel Vengeance and Maverick, and you also have some great B&Ms with Gatekeeper, Raptor, and Valraven. And then you also have great coasters such as Millennium Force and Magnum XL 200, along with the currently closed Top Thrill Dragster, which will be renovating and reopening in 2024 with a brand new launch system. And that's part of the reason why I don't recommend visiting this park for the rest of the 2023 season, because Top Thrill Dragster will be reopening next year, new and improved. Other pros when it comes to Cedar Point is you have a very good collection of flat rides, which includes their Frisbee attraction, Max Air, their Drop Tower, Power Tower, and their Windseeker, which is just known as Windseeker. And then it's also fairly affordable, as most tickets to this park will cost you between 40 and 60 bucks, which is honestly crazy just because of how much attractions you're getting access to. Now, in my opinion, this park is not perfect, as this park does have plenty of cons, including little theming, as for example, Steel Vengeance and Maverick and the whole Frontier Town section do have some decent theming, but that's really the only themed section throughout the park. At least one thing that's good with Cedar Point is the park has a great appearance, so it doesn't necessarily need good theming as long as the park looks very good, which it does. And then another problem when it comes to Cedar Point is like it could use more family attractions, as you do have plenty of family attractions throughout the park, but the park could use a couple more family coasters, and the park is making an improvement in this regard, as their latest coaster addition was their Wild Mouse coaster, which seems to me like it's a pretty good family coaster. And another con that I forgot to mention is that the park could desperately use a dark ride, as the park is currently lacking a dark ride. But even though Cedar Point definitely has its cons, I highly recommend visiting Cedar Point if you visit Ohio, just because of the amazing coaster collection. Let's move on to easily the second best park in Orlando, and that being Islands of Adventure. Now, the pros with this park is you have some great thrilling coasters, including both the Incredible Hulk coaster and Velocicoaster, which are two of the best coasters in Orlando. Then you also have some amazing world-class dark rides, including Harry Potter and the Forbidden Journey, which is in my opinion the best dark ride I've ever ridden, and I am not in one bit a Harry Potter fan. And then as for other dark rides, you have The Amazing Adventures of Spider-Man, which even though it opened with the park back in 1999, it's still a great dark ride with some very good effects. And then you also have some absolutely incredible theming, as each land in the park really immerses you into the world, and there's really no other example that exemplifies this better than the Wizarding World of Harry Potter, which, like I mentioned earlier, I am in not one bit a Harry Potter fan, but I can definitely appreciate the work that went in to making that land so incredible. Even though Islands of Adventure has several pros, you do have some very noticeable cons. One, this park is one of the most expensive parks out there, as a day ticket can typically cost you between $130 and $150 on average, and that's just talking about Islands of Adventure. That's not a park hopper ticket with Universal Studios. So this park is easily one of the most expensive out there. And then another problem when it comes to Islands of Adventure is you do have some heavy crowds, though there are ways of avoiding said crowds, like using the park's single rider lines and buying the park's Universal Express Pass. But if you want more information on the best ways to skip the lines at various amusement parks, check out the video in the card above for more information. But getting back to Islands of Adventure, this is truly an incredible park, and I highly recommend it if you have the money to spend. Let's move on to America's sweetest park, and that being Hersheypark in Hershey, Pennsylvania. Now, the main pros of this park is that you have an incredibly stacked kosher collection, including great rides such as Wildcats Revenge, Sky Rush, Storm Runner, Fahrenheit, Great Bear, and many others. Another thing this park is known for is their world-class treats, which includes the park's king-sized milkshakes, and these milkshakes are completely massive. Like, for example, they can easily feed 3 to 4 people, and maybe even 5 if you really weren't that hungry. And another aspect of the park that I love is that there's a lot to do other than the rides. Like, for example, the park has an included water park, which is known as the Boardwalk. And though it's not that big, you do have some fairly good attractions, as you do have a good mat racer and a good water coaster in Breaker's Edge. And then you also have a zoo attached to the park known as Zoo America, which you can see many different animals. And then also just outside of the park, you have Hershey's Chocolate World, which features a dark ride where you can see the process of how chocolate is being made, and you can make your own candy bar along with plenty of other attractions. And then really the only con when it comes to Hersheypark, in my opinion, is the lack of theming, as the only theming you really do get is to the Hershey's candy, which in my opinion isn't really a big con, as when it comes to Hersheypark is really an amusement park and not a theme park, as you go here mainly for the rides. So in my opinion, that's not a big con. And for those reasons, that's why I believe Hersheypark is a must visit if you're in Pennsylvania. So let's move on to both Busch Gardens parks. Now, these are some of the most well-rounded parks I've ever been to, and some of the pros include their amazing collection of thrilling coasters, as for example at Busch Gardens Tampa, you have, in my opinion, the best coaster in the world in Iron Gwazi. And then at Busch Gardens Williamsburg, you also have like rides such as Pantheon, which I have not ridden, but I've heard nothing but good things about that ride. Then you have several other great coasters. Now, other pros with the Busch Gardens parks include some fairly good food. Now, this is mainly a pro for Busch Gardens Williamsburg, as due to the park's European theming, you get some more authentic European food throughout the park. And then, not that Busch Gardens Tampa has bad food, but you don't really get that same level of unique cuisine that you get at Busch Gardens Williamsburg, as with Busch Gardens Tampa, you don't really have any native African cuisine throughout the park. And then another aspect of these parks that both parks are incredible in is their atmosphere, as at least for Busch Gardens Tampa, this park is literally in the middle of a Tampa city block, and somehow is able to make you not even realize that you're in the middle of Tampa. The park is really able to transport you to feeling like you're in jungle, and that's really impressive for Busch Gardens Tampa. And it's also impressive with Busch Gardens Williamsburg, but in my opinion, not as much, even though Busch Gardens Williamsburg has won the award for Most Beautiful Park several years in a row. I just feel like even though the theming is amazing, it doesn't impress me in the same way as Busch Gardens Tampa does. Now, another aspect of both these parks is their amazing animals. Now, this is mainly a pro for Busch Gardens Tampa, as they have a much wider selection of animals, but Busch Gardens Williamsburg also has plenty of animals to enjoy. And then, now both these parks are not perfect, as you have a couple cons. One, both parks definitely need a good dark ride. As with Busch Gardens Tampa and Busch Gardens Williamsburg, you have had good dark rides in the past, but most of them have been removed. And also, both parks, in my opinion, could use more flat rides, though in my opinion this isn't that big of a deal, as both parks definitely are not lacking in the attractions department, but this is especially true for Busch Gardens Williamsburg because the park just recently removed their drop tower, so I would like them to replace that with a better drop tower in the future. But despite these cons, both these parks are 100% worth visiting, and in my opinion, Busch Gardens Tampa is easily the best park in Florida, and Busch Gardens Williamsburg is easily one of the best parks out there too. Now, in my opinion, Dollywood and Silver City are the two best parks in the United States, and that's just because both parks literally excel at everything. You have a slew of thrilling coasters at both parks, including rides such as Lightning Rod, Wild Eagle, and Thunderhead at Dollywood, and then Outlaw Run, Time Traveler, and Wildfire at Silver City, which are just a couple of both these parks' amazing coasters. And then also both parks have world-class food, as literally these parks, you can literally get any food at these parks and you will not be disappointed, as any food item you get is literally gonna be incredible. And then also both these parks have some amazing shows. I will admit I have not seen any of these park shows in a long time, but these parks do have some amazing shows that are mainly focused around singing and dancing, and along with that, these parks have some amazing atmosphere, as they're heavily wooded and really give off a level of southern charm that personally I just love. And now these parks do have some cons, though I am kind of nitpicking with these cons. One of the biggest cons to me is that these parks could use a dark ride, as you could consider Blazing Fury at Dollywood and Fire in the Hole at SeaWorld City to be dark rides, but in my opinion they're more coasters over dark rides. And at least with SeaWorld City, you do have the Flooded Mine, which is a shooting dark ride, though that has been removed at Dollywood. So I would definitely like to see some more dark rides in these parks' future. And then another con with these parks is they could use some more flat rides, and both parks have a drop tower and an S&S Scream and Swing, which in my opinion are both plenty for these parks, but I would like to see maybe one more flat ride per park get added in the future. So even despite those very nitpicky cons, these parks are truly incredible, and which I explain more in another video, so check that out in the card above. So if you enjoyed this video, I just want to thank you for watching the video. And remember to give this video a like and share this video with anybody you know who would be possibly interested in visiting any amusement park this year. Then also remember to subscribe to Southeastern Thrills to keep up with all the latest theme park travel information, and peace.